Bottom of page 13, let's talk about what you can do with the motion. And some of these things we have already talked about. You brought them up in your discussion, which was wonderful. But there's a whole list there in the box, 2 slides worth. You can amend a motion, debate it, which is the discussion that Lee talked about. You can divide it, which means that you want to consider it in parts. So let's say it's a kind of a complicated issue. You could have somebody make a motion. I move that we divide this, this topic into a part A and a part B, which allows you to vote separately.
Which makes that an amendment.
Sorry?
That would be an amended motion to divide it,
Oh,
right?
well, it's like an amendment, but it's called dividing. It just means you're dividing it, but you are, in a sense, you're amending that one stated verbiage there into 2 different, but they have to be the same. You can't change any of the wording. You just say, this part we'll vote separately, this part will vote separately. So technically, what could have happened, we had the motion on the grant request. They could have said they wanted to divide that into approval of the grant request and approval of the amount of the grant request. So Harold could have said, I move that we divide this motion, this agenda item, into approving how much we'll pay and then approving whether or not we'll pay it. So then he could have moved, and then they vote on that. They have to say yay or nay, they're willing to divide it. And if a lot of the people go, yeah, that makes sense, they might say aye on dividing, and so then anybody could do it, but probably Harold if he brought it up in the first place, but it could be any member could say, I move that then the amount of the grant be $75K. They go ahead and they vote on that, and then you move the grant itself and you vote on that one. So that's dividing. It just means you're going to break it. It could be very helpful if you have something that's either politically divisive for certain parts of it, or maybe something that's got some sensitivity to it, and you actually look at that item and you say, gosh, I wish we could do this, but I don't want to have to do that. A motion to divide allows you to separately deal with the parts, and so you might end up approving something that you want, but it gets rid of the thing that you don't want because everybody votes to divide on that, and then they vote it down.
Question, Pat, but if you divide a motion in that manner and you approve one item of that motion and not the other, then let's say the grant. Mm-hmm. You could approve the $75,000, but you would not approve the grant. So you would essentially eliminate.
You could.
Eliminate the entire motion or make it.
That could happen.
I don't want to say impotent because it doesn't have nothing to enforce that,
Yeah, you're correct, Derek. If the group really wanted to get rid of that, they could get rid of it that way. I mean, they could make it not happen.
So you could have a complete motion and then make it completely ineffective just by granting half of it or portions of it and not the other.
It could happen, but I think what would be more likely is that the wisdom of the group would prevail and they would vote on it in such a way that they really wouldn't let that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hoping the group would be very smart and they would get, we're gonna ruin this if we do this, and then they'll vote down the division. They'll say, no, we're not going to divide this. We're going to go back and we're going to treat it the way we originally treated it. Still allows Harold to want to amend the amount, but you're more likely to actually pass the whole thing. Yeah, so you're right. I think the group can control that, if you will.
Pat, I've seen division happen on motions when the clarity of the motion has too many elements.
Agree.
And that's
you're
a
right.
very good use of dividing the motion.
Yep.
And it keeps the voting on chunks that end up making up the whole, but it's very clear exactly what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It's like a motion that's a paragraph long, too hard to understand.
Exactly, and that's one of those, if there's some discipline, if you will, and structure around how that motion is made as a verbatim motion, usually you don't get these paragraph long, complicated things, that are hard to figure out. If you stick with very clear, specific verbatim motions and people are being told, please restate your motion to be clearer, what happens? They tend to get it down to the important stuff. then you're less likely to have to do it. But I agree with you, that's a good use of dividing. So you can table, you can object, you can postpone, you can reconsider. Note, there's a little caveat here on the reconsider. So reconsider means, let's say we voted down that grant request, and then later on the group is thinking, maybe we shouldn't have done that. You can reconsider that motion. You vote on whether or not you want to reconsider it. And if the group wants it to stand being voted down, they'll just vote it down. They'll vote down the reconsideration. But if there's enough people feeling like, oh, we really shouldn't have voted that down, you can get a little bit of groundswell here, a little bit of momentum to approve first the fact that you will reconsider it, and then maybe the vote would change. It's possible. I mean, it might change. It might stay the same as it was, but you only ever have that option at the same meeting. You can't go back the next meeting and say, oh, I want to reconsider that grant request. No. It's a done deal now. You'd have to put it on as an agenda item again and treat it as a whole new agenda item. But reconsideration is allowed at the same meeting. So, it's an interesting one. You may not see it very often, but it's possible. So you can refer to committees. You can, if something was rejected, renewing, it's just kind of a technical name. It's like bringing it on again if it gets voted down. So I think those two, reconsideration and renewing, I think they're very similar because they're just a way to bring back something that was voted down and try once more. And that one, again, should be at the same meeting. Rescinding is, that's an interesting one. So the rescinding is when you approve the grant request, and then you have buyer's remorse, so to speak, and the group thinks, we're not going to have enough money for that. We really shouldn't have done that. Somebody can put a motion on the floor to rescind that, and what'll happen is, even though it was an approved grant request, if the rescinding is approved, it's gone. That grant is not going to happen. So rescinding allows you to actually take a previous vote and change it. Or not. I mean, sometimes it stays the same. There might be one person with buyer's remorse. So that one person wants to change the vote. They bring it on as a rescind. I move that we rescind our approval of the grant request and let's say it had ended up being $75,000, and the group votes it down again. Like, no, we're not going to rescind. So we're not going to approve that we'll even vote on that. So what happens is it's done. It's a done deal. That grant request is going to happen, and nobody can change it. So you can terminate, you can vote, you can withdraw. So all the different options that you have to deal with these. So when you think about the two things that you see most often, you'll see them all the time. You said them, Lee, so I know you know the answer to this. Somebody makes a motion. What's the next thing you're going to see from our list here?
Second.
You're going to see the second, absolutely. So the most common thing you'll see, if it doesn't get seconded, you aren't going to be moving further. So you better see the second. And then once you have a motion and a second, what are you going to do?
You either can vote on it, or you may have an amendment on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you're
that's
going to
kind of
vote,
about 50-50.
or you're going to have one of these other things: the amend, the divide, the postpone. You're going to have one of these other things take place. But voting, most amendments get votes taken, right away. They don't get all these other things happening. But the interesting and complicated ones do get these other things happening. So most common actions, a second and a vote, and then over on 14, we'll add the other ones that you just mentioned. My question to you is, what other actions have you seen happen recently? And you said amend, yes. Over on the top of page 14, so that's one you probably have seen. There's no one right answer here, it's just whatever you've seen. Marquise, what else have you seen at a meeting from that list?
The debating or
The
discussing.
debating and discussing, add that to your list at the top of page 14. Discussion, debate, very common. Anything else you've seen it at a meeting recently?
Withdrawal.
Withdraw. Oh,
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Put that way. Add that one there. So you've seen somebody withdraw the motion. Excellent. Okay. So those are all the different actions you can take. Here's a little acronym. I'll give you an acronym. We love acronyms. So SDA-MR. The order of handling things with your motion is second it, maybe debate it, maybe amend it, but vote on it, maybe reconsider. So you've got your two must-have, your second and your vote. Then you've got your three other common possibilities: discussing it, amending it, reconsidering it. So if you just think SDAMR, those are the typical things you're going to see. I see you writing that, so I'm actually going to give you a minute to write down that acronym. It's a nice, handy little thing to remember.
Question, Pat.
Yes.
There's been some instances where a motion has been made, and it's been seconded, and then during the debate and the discussion, there's been other points being brought forth. So rather than voting on that particular motion, the person that placed that motion basically withdrew the motion.
Exactly
Is that a
right.
shortcut, or is
Well,
they're just doing it?
I think it's just smart.
Well, and I'm just saying, are they doing it to wipe the slate clean
Yes.
in order to allow the group to start over?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So it's a shortcut to a lot of more time spent doing some very complicated
Okay.
amending or whatever. Because if that person withdraws the motion, then those other points that were just brought up, that leaves anybody else free to make a new one. Because remember, original main motion can come from any of them. So somebody who had some discussion that they put on about that, rather than trying to deal with voting about all of that related to that original motion, I think it's a smart move for if the first person doesn't have some really vested interest in it, it's a smart move to say, let's just pull this off. Let's start again. And so the chair is very smart in that situation to say, in light of the lively discussion and debate that we have had on this topic, does anyone have a new motion for the floor? And that leaves the door open for any of those people who brought up those points to go ahead and make their own motion now. And then it will be dealt with in due course, like everything else. You know, there might be more debate, more discussion, might be amended, might be whatever, any of the rest of the things we had in our list. But I think that's probably smart. If the person is going, oh, this is going to be an uphill battle, I think that's fine. And you know what, that same person can put the motion right out there again with different wording. It's because they're sensing the group is not with me on this. They're feeling like, okay, I do not have the support I need to pass this. Then all they have to do is say, I have a new motion for the floor. They take into account some of those things that were said, and they go ahead and they make a new motion. And then that one can be handled. So that's a good move. And finally, just a motion, this is just it's kind of an aside thing. You might see people make a motion to recess. That's one that you do have to second, and if it's like if the group needs a break. So, you know, they just, out of the middle of nowhere, they come on and they say, I move that we recess for 10 minutes. So one of you could have done that. You could have like played with me a little bit here. And you could have, when I said you're going to have the break at 10, one of you could have said, I move that we recess for 10 minutes, Pat. You said we get a break. But you were also kind. You were just waiting for me to stop, you know, and do it. But technically, you could have done it. So once you come back, just like we did right now, we picked up exactly where we left off. You don't skip around. You don't say, let's start with this. You don't say, oh, let's start with this other interesting agenda item here. Oh, no, no. You go right back. It's like bookmarking. You go right back to the point where you were. You pick up from there and move on. And motion to adjourn. This one takes precedence over everything else. So if somebody wants to adjourn for some reason, they bring that up. If you remember, that was one of those privileged motions. And you can only just not do that if there's any other motion on the floor. Like, you know, when things get really heated, I've seen a group do that. It got kind of hot and testy. And so one of the members thought, let's just cool things off a little bit. Let's just get the people out of this room. And they made a move to adjourn. And I went, smart move. That was a good one. Because this group just needed to take a breath and just be out of that room for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I think you had like 15, and come back in. And it would pick up where they left off, and things would, yeah, I'm sorry, that was the recess. The person made the motion for the recess. The motion for adjourn, yeah, you shouldn't make that if there's still business on the floor. If there are other things on the agenda, you can't just decide you're going to adjourn because it got a little hot and testy. So, sorry, I kind of switched over to recess. You cannot adjourn if there's business left, but unless you moved maybe to table things to a future agenda. Somebody could do that. It could be getting very late, and there's still like 2 things to cover. Somebody could say, I move that we table agenda item X till our next meeting, pass, fail. I move that we table agenda item Y till our next meeting, and then somebody could move to adjourn. Maybe it's midnight and they're still, I don't know. Do they ever do that, Lee? Do you ever see people try to stop the meeting just because it went on way too long, or do they not actually go on long like
Well,
that?
yeah, keeping on on point with our agenda and finishing up at time is a pet peeve of mine. I really like to try to do that.
Yeah, that's good.
Sometimes there's a lot of debate and it's hard to do, but I remind everybody that of the time. So,
Yeah, that's good. So you sound like someone who keeps a good brisk process moving along. That's good. I like to hear that. All right, let's talk about your voting procedures here. So we talked about this earlier. Can the number required to pass a motion be different than the majority? Who remembers what we said about that? Kind of early on.
Yeah, but the group has to agree that that's what they want to do.
It can be different if the group votes for a specific number. Absolutely. The members can decide that they want, and it's usually for a specific item. It's not like perpetuity. It's not like this group is always going to require 2/3 now. It's for a specific agenda item. So if you see something coming up for, and it's the next agenda item, somebody can say, I move on agenda item 4 that we require a vote of 2/3 for this to be acted upon. And if the group approves that, then whatever you do with that agenda item, you're going to have a different voting structure for that one only. Once in a while, it does occur. Normally, you're going to see these types of things. You're going to see, oops, my button went too fast there. You're going to see voice votes, hand raising, standing, or written ballot, the secret ballot. So make sure you jot those in your book there on page 14, voice, hands, standing, written ballot. In my experience, the absolutely most common one is voice vote. All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. And you'll see on this slide a comment about the split vote. So this is a new request from the council that split votes do have the names recorded. Absolutely 100% the right thing to do. I mean, it's one of those things where the public may want to know how people voted on a particular issue. And the thing that I think most strongly liken this to for you is a Senate vote. Let's say there's something going on in the House of Representatives, or Senate or House of Representatives. If the public was just told, okay, there were 374, in favor of this, there were 291 opposed. If you do not know who voted for those in favor of and opposed, you do not know how your senator or representative is voting for your district. So that's why when you go all the way up to the top in Washington, all votes have names attached. But I think even in Queen Creek, split votes, it would be important to have names attached because the public may want to know where people stand on certain issues. And it's a newer thing. That's right, Debbie, newer thing. It's kind of just this year. In the past, it hasn't been that strong of a recommendation.
That is correct. In the
Yeah.
past, we haven't identified names or attached names.
Right.
But the council would like to see those attached for the reasons that you said, and also council would like to, have the opportunity to perhaps discuss with the committee member why they voted a certain way, so they could have a better understanding of their concerns or issues.
Okay.
okay, back to the definition of a split vote.
Uh-huh.
Can you clarify that?
I'm sorry?
Can you clarify what makes a split vote? I guess I'm not following.
Anything that's not a majority. I mean, anytime that the majority vote will automatically pass it. So anything that is not a majority vote, well, that's turning it down.
Yeah, it's just turning
Well,
it
so
in.
actually, a split vote is any vote.
It's not
It-
unanimous.
Yeah, it's
not
anything that,
unanimous, right.
when you have all in favor, aye, and everybody goes aye, all opposed, no. All right, there's nothing, there's no differences there. But the moment you have a nay, even one person
Right.
says no, then that's your split vote. So even though it's majority, there definitely is a majority that said yes, there was that one person that said no. So pretty much, it's easiest to just find out who the no vote was. So no vote was, committee member so-and-so, and then everybody else is just listed as a yes. But it's any time there's even one single no on a majority vote.
When there's all in favor, all the names all were in favor.
Well, exactly, yeah, when you say all in favor and everybody says aye, all opposed, none, there's silence, well, then you know that everybody who was voting is a yes vote.
So on a split vote, are you asking for the name of the non-majority voting individuals?
But actually, it's all names, doesn't it become all names then, because the non,
So you would know who was in favor and who was
Right,
opposed?
correct.
Okay, so that was I guess I was trying to understand.
And also the abstention has to be listed too.
and again?
The person who abstains from voting should be listed
An
also.
abstention is always listed by name, yeah. In fact, on page 15, if you would write that down, you'll see in the middle of the page abstention. Make a note that says you do want that recorded by name, and there's no need to justify or explain. In other words, if somebody abstains, they don't really even have to say why. An abstention is just an abstention, that's all it is. I mean, it isn't like the group turns to him and says, okay, Bill, why are you not voting on that? He feels like he has to justify a reason. You technically don't. I mean, there's nothing in our bylaws, is there, Debbie, that says an abstention needs to tell why they abstained? And in Robert's rules, it's just, it's simply an act that you do not have to tell why it took place. You also see the adjournment in the middle of page 15 there, and that, remember, was a privileged motion. You can set a time to adjourn, and people can vote on that if they want, but normally most meetings have a set time. You just do not make those motions when there's anything on the floor. Now, how often do you have, on page 16, how often do you have things coming to the committee that are reports from, from some other group? Reports pretty common? Or not so common?
For me, not so common.
Not so common?
And very common.
Very common for you?
Yes.
The Transportation Advisory Committee also has regional studies that come to them for recommendations.
Did you say planning was on?
Transportation.
Advisory has reports brought to them for recommendations.
Okay, yeah, that would absolutely make sense. Okay, well, make a list of all of these things. They're in your book, and I've given you some little hints with bold printing on your slide there. When that report comes to you, you can adopt it. This is page 16. Adopt it with no comment, which means you just vote on it as an aye, and you don't have to even say anything about it. And you just, there's no discussion, unless somebody brings a motion to debate it, you just go ahead and vote on it. You can return it to whoever was the group that brought it to you, to a subcommittee or a staff member for more information. I think probably, Eric, that's common for you, right? You would take the report, you return to whoever brought it to you, the staff person or the subcommittee, and you return it to them for more information. Because I heard you say that's a pretty common thing for you, to return for more information. You can refer it to another committee, and I think the transportation that Laura was talking about just a second ago, I can see that happening with them, that a report comes from one group, but then there's a whole aspect of this that for whatever reason needs to be examined in a completely different light. So they refer it to a different committee to get a completely different perspective on something. So I absolutely could see that happening. You can give it to an officer to study, you can give it to a member to study. But remember, that's a vote. You're voting to give it to the vice chair, to study. You can refer it to an auditing committee, not so common. Did I do the wrong one? Oh yeah, refer to an auditing committee. There you go, one at the bottom. Not as common. You can postpone. That's fairly common. Accepting the entire report, very common, most common action of all that occurs. To me, accepting and adopting are kind of the same thing. I mean, accepting the report and adopting the report are both approval of, the content that's in it, so they seem very similar to me. Rejecting, once in a while, you'll see that. You will also once in a while see that they will accept part of it. So if that happens, the motion would be to accept the part of the report dealing with A, B, C, therefore not accepting, rejecting, some part of it. And then at that point, you might refer that part for more information. You might give that to an officer to study. You might postpone that part for later. So when you adopt only a part of a report, you really have to do something with the other part. You're either going to outright reject it, or you're going to send it back to get more information. Okay, any question at all on these reports? I don't see this one very often. That last one about rejecting the report and substituting another one, another minority report, that would have to be a very politically charged situation, and probably a group that's got some extremely tense issues that they're dealing with. So, I mean, the Roberts Rules gives a way to make it happen, but I don't know that I actually see that happening, where they say, we're going to totally reject this group and we're going to substitute this other report in its place, and then they vote on that one instead. That you've got a highly divided family in that case. That committee is not acting as one. Well, I mean, they are acting as one as a public body, but they are certainly very divided in their views. Okay, any question on any of the reports that you deal with? Okay, complete change of topic there on page 16. Let's talk about something that's a little bit different than kind of the normal meetings that we've been dealing with so far. Can your board, commission, or committee have an executive session where the public is not allowed to attend?
Yes.
That is correct. The answer to that is yes. They absolutely can have that according to our ARS. Our statute says that an executive session is allowed. What do you do with that? Does that mean you just have it and you never tell anybody? You just kind of say, let's all have an executive session. You kind of huddle and...
Don't you have to have legal counsel there?
You have to have...
An attorney present?
Well, maybe. And often, well, these are usually legal matters that they're doing this for, so usually the attorney is present. But think more about the public out there. Remember, we're having this session outside the view of our public.
Executive session would have to be posted.
Absolutely, you bet, Lee. So this meeting has to follow the same posting guidelines as all others. So yes, it must be posted. The open meeting law says to give a general idea of what's being conducted there. You don't have to specifically say, like personnel matters, those are always executive session. You don't have to say that this is, disciplinary action for employee XYZ. No, I mean, they don't do that. You just say it's a personnel action, end of discussion. So the open meeting law wants you to post very generally what it is you're doing that for. So you might say personnel action, you might say legal action. That one, Alan, the town attorney absolutely would be there for. But you are allowed to do that. That keeps its own separate set of executive session minutes. Those minutes are not posted on your website. They are signed when they are approved and returned immediately to the town clerk. There's no posting of those. So is that pretty clear about executive session? Any question on that one? All right. Bottom of page 16, I just shared with you something kind of fun here. There's also something called Riggins Rules. I don't know if you've ever even heard of these, but it was a Phoenix, was a planning commission, Gretchen? Fred Riggins was planning, Phoenix Planning?
Yes,
Yeah,
Phoenix
Planning
Planning
Commission member who developed what he called a set of Riggins Rules. And it's kind of fun just to Google these. So just Google Riggins Rules, R-I-G-G-I-N-S, it's spelled in your book there. And you can print out this, I would say, 4 to 5 pages of behavioral guidelines. And what's fun about the Riggins Rules is they have nothing to do with what we've been talking about with Robert's Rules, which is all this kind of legal stuff and how we're relating to the meeting law and all the postings and that kind of thing. Riggins Rules is where he's telling you how to be a nice player in the sandbox. So he's doing things like, make sure that you respect the chair and dress neatly and be on time for your meetings. And if there's a vote that's going to be taken, don't announce to the whole table how you're going to vote before they actually do it. So, you wouldn't sit there and say, hey, everybody, I'm going to vote yes on this. just keep your mouth shut until the vote is called for, and then, then go ahead and vote. But it's, it's just an interesting insight into that these simple behaviors, like dress nice and talk nice and be respectful to people and do your homework so that you actually know the issues under discussion. You know what they're talking about. I mean, they're just kind of like good common sense, but they're fun to look at. Gretchen and I got a big kick out of them. All right, on page 17, let's talk for a moment. Just I want to mention what just some general things. Then you don't have to worry so much about all these postings and the minutes because your staff member is going to do that for you. So they will take care of a lot of these details. But I want you to know what it is the expectation is from the town for what the staff member is going to be doing. So just very, very quickly on this page, the clerk is going to create the agenda for you, so the clerk will do that. The staff manager will go ahead and make sure that it gets posted, that there's now kind of a accepted practice coming in that we want minutes to use the agenda as the template. So if you're seeing really strange formats come to you for your minutes, that shouldn't be happening because there really are some excellent guidelines right down to what size font should be used and what kind of headings should be used. And I think that Queen Creek is ahead of the game, if you will, from some other places because they're saying we want consistency, we want professionalism, we want these things to have a standard so that when people look at it, they know exactly what they're looking at, they can have an expectation. So even though planning and zoning does their own thing in terms of agendas, they create that, the clerk doesn't produce for them, they're going to still follow these same kinds of guidelines. We don't want the kinds of things that make your committee look bad because there's all these different fonts and colors and things like these paragraph-long motions that you were talking about. We want the one font. You'll see that it is, in a minute, it's Calibri. There should be just one color. Black and white is the best, always. The recommendation that we're going to be giving staff members today is that they take the agenda that's provided and simply insert all of the discussion into that so they don't have to create a very different looking document. And I'm going to be emphasizing with them this whole thing about the verbatim motions. I'm very, very firm on that, and I think many of them are doing great. And there's maybe a few people that let some of the members go on a bit long. So we're hoping that they'll all start corralling everybody. And they're going to take care of all the motions and the seconds and the votes. And the posting, I think I heard Gretchen mention that earlier, but it's in a box there in the middle of the page. The staff will post the draft minutes or the results within 10 working days. And then after they've approved, that will be 48 hours that it will be posted on the town website for any of the members of the public to review. And then the hard copy, of course, always comes back to the clerk for signatures. So on these next couple of pages, you're going to see some good examples. So that's why this participant manual is a nice reference guide for you because you can look at these afterwards. Hang on to this page and see if your agendas look like this because they certainly should. On page 18, here's what the agenda template is. And you'll see it's very clear. It's got everything that's most critical. What is that board, commissioner, committee? Where is the meeting? What is the date? What was the time? Who's attending? They can, if there's any introductions, they can do that. They put specifics in about the public comment. There's one little piece about that I think it's in your bylaws. If there's a whole lot of people wanting to comment on something and there's not a difference of opinion, they all kind of think the same thing, you do not have to listen to 12 people say the same thing over and over and over and over. You're actually allowed to ask those people to appoint somebody to kind of speak for that group. So one person will say, on behalf of these 12 people, here's the comment that we want to make. But there's a nice provision for you not to have like an excessive amount of the same comment over and over and over. That's a really good thing. And then there's all your discussion items that you'll be seeing the motions on, all the actions that you'll be taking. There might be some announcements or not, and then you'll see the time of adjournment. So that you'll even see right down to the thing here, it's a 10-point font. So I think the guidelines are going to be excellent for the staff members. I think you're going to start seeing some really, really good consistency in the minutes that are coming back to your committee. That's exciting. And then on page 19, you just see the standard verbiage for the announcement, or the notice, or the disclaimer, the ADA stuff. So that's all standard verbiage you should start seeing come through. And if you're not, then I think you should ask the question, why are we not following the agenda for the minutes that we're seeing come back? There are some other great samples here on page 20. Here's an example of a staff report. Again, you can very clearly see the sections of the report. I love that there's a template here that says not only do you see the committee and the staff recommendation, but it's related to a council goal. That is awesome. It really focuses the business you're doing. And it says that this is important to something that this town council, wants to see happen, wants to move forward. And then, of course, you do see the proposed motion, you do see the discussion. This particular example has a little bit more paragraph work than I would even like to see. I think even more of that in that big paragraph at the top could be bulleted points. I'm going to be recommending to staff that they bullet things wherever possible. But I mean, this is a great example. It is still a very, very good example. It just maybe has some opportunity to put a few more bullets in. You will also see in the report the fiscal impact, very critical, that you always know what the budget impact is going to be. And then, of course, alternatives. There might be various kinds of attachments. So that's an example of one of those staff reports. Now, the next page is a committee. So again, the committee report is going to have many of the same kinds of elements. You'll still see the name and the date and the details. But in the body of the report is a little bit shorter. This one, if you notice, the items are just more short, short sentences. I mean, I would love to see some bullets in one like this too. So this is a place for me to make the recommendation to say, let's put bullets wherever we can put bullets, especially when you've got item A, item B, C, D, E. There's great opportunity to shorten that one. Of course, you always see the dates for the next meetings. So are these looking familiar? Is this what you're seeing?
The committee reports are the reports that are given by either chair or staff members to the council. And it's a briefing of the meeting that took place. For those of you who may not be or know what the committee reports are.
Okay. There's a short version, too, on page 26. This is where you really do see the bullets. Because here you've got the same kind of header information, so you know the committee, the date, and the general items of discussion. But here you really just do see, instead of those great long paragraphs in the previous pages, now you just do see the bullet points. I would like to actually see kind of a in-between version, that these bullet points have a little bit more detail, but not the huge paragraphs that you see here. So I think there's a way to maybe combine that long and short and get a short version, but one with just slightly more detail in it. But again, this is another one that you might see. And then on page 27, here's all the current recommendations for kind of the nitty-gritties on the minutes. The Calibri font should be used. No italics, no different colors. The staff is going to be very careful to make sure that all the motions are clear and verbatim, all the votes are recorded. They will be making sure that those split votes are recorded. And I think the biggest change that I have seen over the years in minutes is we've gotten away from these lengthy word for word, somebody basically just like capturing everything that somebody is saying. And that was years and years ago, was an old style of minutes. I mean, pages and pages and pages, paragraphs top to bottom. And I just don't see that anywhere anymore. Everybody is moving more toward the short paragraphs, toward the bullets, toward the less is more. That people aren't reading those long things. They don't have time. So anyway, that's kind of like your general preferred format. So what I want to task you with is to start paying attention to what you see coming out of your meetings, seeing if it's following these kinds of guidelines. You now actually in your manual have copies of what it should look like. So you can go back and say, well, it kind of matches exactly, or you might see a place where you'd say, our committee's kind of thinking we'd like to see a little bit of a shorter, shorter thing here. We want to see more of the bullets. You actually have some input to that. So any question? We got some, like I said, great samples here for you to keep for review. That's pretty much what I want you to do with that. If no discussion, I move that Gretchen come to the front and talk a little bit about the changing procedures and the administrative procedures at the moment.
Oh, go, okay. Regan's rules,
The appearance,
right.
be consistent. There you go.
Okay, so is everybody familiar with open meeting law? You basically, everything that Pat went through with you as far as the minutes and indicating that everything in your minutes should be posted prior to the minutes on an agenda. And it is not acceptable to change or add something on the minutes that didn't happen, okay? Or to paraphrase. And those are the things that we need to go into with the staff.
In fact, did you want to cover administrative procedures after that? Because I have administrative in here, but I see here's
Right.
open meeting law. So did you want to cover this after
Yeah,
we go through
I
open
think
meeting
so.
law?
And
Okay.
honestly,
it.
those, it's two, like maybe not even 2 pages, 1.5 pages.
2 pages.
And basically, as I mentioned this morning, the administrative procedures are to help staff, this is my opinion, to help staff understand and clarify what their position is. And in order to create consistency, in order to remain consistent with the open meeting law, which is the law, then we have to rely on the staff who takes those minutes to be able to accomplish this. And they're basically the liaison. So what this does is basically identify, who are we talking about? All the people responsible for supplying that support to all of the committees, commissions, and boards. And what this basically is specifying is when the agenda should be posted, and I mentioned that this morning, when the minutes should be posted, both draft and final, and as well as presentations. And this is basically saying that any exceptions to these set procedures require town manager approval and or a designee like the department director, and that continued violation of the procedures by a staff manager may result in disciplinary action. So that's pretty strong language, but
Toothy, very toothy language.
again, I'm very impressed with what Queen Creek is doing as far as creating that transparency. We have to rely on staff to be able to take minutes that are accurate. And that means we don't make stuff up, we don't, paraphrase to the point where you don't know, that you read the minutes and say, did I say that? They should reflect accurately. And we're talking about possible violations that other cities and towns have experienced. And this is a violation of, this involves the Attorney General's office. So, and I'll just state one particular, I think it was Cave Creek. Was it Cave Creek?
It was Cave Creek, you bet it was.
Cave Creek violated the open meeting law twice, just in this past year. And one of the things they did, the mayor announced to the entire town that we're going to have an open meeting. And we're going to come together, the mayor and council, and we're going to discuss anything you'd like. Well, they didn't have an agenda, and the agenda didn't specify it, so they're in violation of the open meeting law.
And Gretchen's not talking out of school here. This was published in the
This
paper.
was published in the Arizona Republic,
it's
so
in the paper.
everything that I talk about has been published, so it's not a secret. So what the Attorney General's office is, they didn't violate anything, they didn't.
It wasn't intentional,
They
like with
didn't,
malice.
yeah, they didn't identify or decide that this was something intentional that the mayor and council did, so they required training. Just like all of you are going through being proactive before you, hopefully you'll never get in trouble by the AG's office, but this is being proactive. And again, I can't say enough how impressed I am with Queen Creek taking the time and to build a program and then videotape it so new board members will have the opportunity to review these important rules so the town doesn't get in trouble. So basically, that's what this administrative order covers.
And you've got those 2 pages right there in your book on page 28 and 29, so you can certainly review them if you need to at all. All right, so I have a brief section here. I just wanted to cover anything on Arizona open meeting law that I hadn't yet talked about. And then we've got some interesting little test scenarios for you. So on page 30, open meeting law, and some of this you've heard us talk about already. You know, it is the way that we're going to conduct our public business, and that is for the purpose of protection. Look who it protects. It protects the public, so that there isn't decision-making made that they aren't a part of. So it's really meant as a public protection, but also a protection of the officials. So those of you who serve, you need to be protected as well. So, you know, you want to make sure that you're doing all of the right things so that you are serving the best way possible. I think in terms of information, transparency of government, integrity of government, it's a great way to build the trust between the public and its officials. So the legal definition of the meeting is the one that you saw. Actually, I think I had it back here on this one. The legal, okay, I have the legal definition. Maybe the legal definition is in your book. There it is. But it's the, and here's where we talk about those devices. The gathering in person or through technological devices of a quorum of members of the public body where they discuss, propose, or take legal action, including any deliberations by a quorum with respect to that. So I want you to make a change. I think the actual citation there is 38-431. If you'll just, I think there's a little typo in there.
Yeah, we made that correction, so it's in there.
Oh, good. Very good. Very good. So you don't have it. You have the correction made. So clarification of some of those technological devices. So, you know, audio, video, cable broadcast, iPad, email, BlackBerry, phone. So,
and let me just jump in and say, because I think it was discussed a little bit earlier, regardless of if a member of council is present via whatever it is, Skype, telephone, they must be present and hear the discussion, especially before they vote. So it's absolutely fine to use any of this technology, but the member must state that they're here. It must be identified. It must be recorded on the minutes that the person was here via whatever technology it is. That has to be stated. Okay.
so just as long as they're specific, they're in good shape, right?
Right.
Okay. So on page 31, again, a number of these things we may have talked about in other sections. We'll just cover anything that's new. You now know what the quorum is. It's a simple majority. The areas that the open meeting law really focuses on is the meetings and the minutes and the agendas. Those are the three things that open meeting law has a greatest concern about. So you see on page 31 a number of just kind of points that we want you to be aware of about the meetings. It's any commission business, it's deliberations, it's anything related to legal action. These are all, I mean, these are all things that have to be open. Even public, the public appearances, we have a term that I've heard used about the optics of something. It means that it doesn't look right, even if there's not anything that's wrong about it. The optics of it, the way it appears, it can cause a problem. So, you know, I think it's a lot of that is how it comes across to the public. When we talk about building the trust comes when everything seems above board. So anyway, much of this we've discussed about the various meetings that you're holding, the side conversations at the bottom of that page. Definitely avoid those. when the
That's one
public,
mistake I've seen a lot of mayor and councils.
side
is they
yeah,
have
they
these
lean
side
over and whisper.
conversations, and it's perception again. They may be talking about the weather, but according to the public, they could be having a side conversation about something that they're going to be acting on.
Exactly. They might be saying, do you think we should take a break in
Right.
20 minutes? You don't know. But the optics of that might not be good. Now, the public comment, we had already talked about that earlier, but it does say you on the commission or the committee or the board should not discuss anything that comes out in that public comment or public appearance unless it's on the agenda. So I think you're very sensitive to that. And page 32 talks about the video conferencing, or the Skyping, I guess, if you will, like Alan brought up, or the telephone. There's put a circle around this one called no reasonable alternative. I think that's interesting because what it's saying is you really should try to be there in person if possible, and the only reason that you should call in through one of these other video, Skype, or telephone, things is if there's no other alternative. And of course, the recording of these things is pretty common today. I observe that most groups do keep a recording, and in fact, some will post the recording on. They don't post it. What they do is they allow somebody to listen to a recording in the presence of an official of that town or city until the minutes are actually physically posted. They actually let them watch or listen to the recording. So that's an interesting one. Non-agenda matters in the middle of the page. This is something that, again, we talked about. You can't take action on anything that comes up in one of those non-agenda matters. Although, you certainly can, if it comes up, we talked about, you can say to your staff member, let's put that on the next agenda, and we'll post it, and we'll talk about it at that time. So all of those non-agenda things have to be dealt with in some fashion, just not discussed. And of course, you never ever talk about any of the business of the commission or the board outside of that group. That's what Gretchen was discussing with Cave Creek, inadvertently violating that by talking about something outside of that. And even, this is interesting, down at the bottom of 32, a series of conversations or emails to a quorum could also violate this. So if somebody sent emails to a quorum of that group, they're technically communicating outside of the commission meeting to the members of that commission. So even that should not be allowed.
And that's another very public mistake, or
Yeah,
a
very common mistake.
mistake that councils make. They think that, well, it's not a quorum because I'm polling individuals via email and it's on my personal computer. Well, it's the message, not the computer, that's the issue. So it's actually splittering the quorum by doing that. And it's in violation of the open meeting law.
Yeah, and on top of 33, you also can't poll the members and then communicate that. I'm not as familiar, Gretchen, with that term called hubs and spokes. Do you know what the hubs and spokes? That it's on page 33.
Oh.
The hubs and spokes. I don't know how they use that. That's not something I use or really have heard
So
anybody else.
the
I mean, I know what
spokes-
hubs and spokes are.
Right. It's just a term that they use for polling. And it's prohibited. We just
Basically,
don't
reaching
want to.
out, reaching out, one person reaching out to multiple people so that it looks like the
Right.
spokes of a wheel.
Whether
and
it's-
you're the hub, you shouldn't be the hub of that kind of communication.
Right, whether it's simultaneously or not. That's considered polling.
Right, because it's
Yeah.
still polling the group. Question, Debbie?
For clarity, one of the things that I have seen, and I've always been very careful, is after a meeting, after the meeting is adjourned, sometimes committee members will stick around and talk and hang out, and they sometimes, we're very careful as not believing, may be discussing an item that's going to come back. That is a violation of open meeting laws if there's more than 3 to the
If it's
conversation.
a
or-
quorum, it is a violation.
So
if
we
it's a
had
quorum, it's
6
a
of them
violation.
hanging around after the meeting, talking about something that's going to come up. We
Right.
need as staff to make sure, no, right?
And my recommendation is to just err on the side of being very conservative and just refrain from that. Refrain from discussing business, whether it's let's go to the pie shop or whatever and continue this.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
very easy to do, but again, if you're in public and you're not a quorum, but you're members of the council and you happen to be discussing business, which is not a violation, it has to be a quorum to be a violation, but it's the perception again. So and again, this is why we put this on page 33. Note, ambiguities are construed in favor of the open meeting law, okay? So
it assumes you're guilty, basically.
well, it's perception.
No, I mean, yeah, they say if you've got any one of if it's not clear what's going on here, we're going to quote the law to you and say you were at fault. Yeah, so that's what it's telling you. And beware of email, just above that box where the ambiguities are construed in favor of the law. Notice it says be careful what you email to each other. You all could very innocently send a message out to everybody else on your board or commission, and it could be seen as a violation. If it's something that's of a business nature and it's potentially a topic for the meeting, then you just have, because again, emails are subject to this disclosure where anybody can come in and request copies. They're public records. Your emails are public records. So somebody could come in and say, I want to see a copy of so-and-so's emails from this date to this date, and you'd have to give it to them. So that's why any commission business, just don't email other people about it. So the agendas on page 33, the notices must be filed with the town clerk 48 hours prior to the meeting. In fact, I think this one said 36, but technically it is 48. I know it's 48 afterwards. I should ask Tracy if that's in part of those new administrative procedures.
Yes, it is.
How soon that, I think it's in those new procedures that are just currently being adopted. But anyway, the notices have to be posted 24 hours before the public meeting. That's why you have to get it to the clerk prior to that. And notices state where and when the meeting will be held. What else? What do you think has to be on when you're posting to notify the public about your meeting? You tell them where, you tell them when, and what else do you tell them?
Specific matters,
topic.
items.
Yeah, all that stuff, what you're going to do, all the stuff that's on the agenda. You'll also see a mention at the bottom about accessibility and making sure that you're not holding a meeting in a spot that's geographically isolated. I think when you've got meetings you're holding, you don't really have to worry so much about that. But it just has to be easy to find, specified, make sure that people can get there. Their GPS can actually find the place that you're going to be at. On the top of 34, it talks about
Before you go back, just
Yeah,
so
go
I'm
ahead.
clear, are you saying that the 36 is right or the 48 is right?
What is the new administrative procedure, Gretchen? Do you know? The slide says 36 hours for the notice to the clerk's office, and the book says 48, I think. So was the change to the 36 is new?
Yeah, I thought, let's put that on the, I think it's 48.
Well, we'll put
but-
that on our parking lot, and we'll double check, because these new procedures are going into place July 1st. So I think some of those things are still being maybe determined. And in fact, probably what we'll do, because of you, we'll get Tracy or somebody to tell us what's in that new communication, and we'll make sure it's on the slide for tonight. But for you four, we'll make sure you know if it's 36 or 48. And we've talked so much about the minutes. I don't know if there's, on page 34, the open meeting law says the minutes have to state the quorum, they have to state who was there, they have to tell what was, all the motions, the seconds, the votes, any legal actions, and they like to know the names of people who bring reports or other materials. So if you have somebody who brings something for your group to consider, make sure their name is included in the minutes. In a lot of places I've seen people getting away from, other than the very specific things that you see here, I've seen them get away a little bit from saying that this person made this statement, you know, attaching the name to everything. I've seen them move towards just saying, here were the list of the 10 points that were made, without saying, so-and-so said this, and so-and-so said that, and so-and-so said that. In fact, the old style minutes would even have the paragraph, you know, Ms. So-and-so said this, Mr. So-and-so said that, Mr. So-and-so stated, Mr. So, and it got to be too much. So the bullet of the point that was made is what's really important. But for somebody who comes and brings something to be reviewed or adopted, you absolutely do want to know who that is. And I'd also pay attention to the person who says, I would like it reflected in the minutes, or I'd like to, if they say, I would like to go on record as saying, or they say, I would like this to be reflected in the minutes, you always attach a name to that. You always make sure that that's happening. If you don't see the staff member writing that down, say, hey, you know, get the name with that. Most common mistake that we see is the lengthy, you know, kind of involved, complicated renderings of everything that was said. And I would just say, get away from that and move more towards the concise summary, the brief bullet, the couple of sentences. That's what people want. If they can't read it in 15 minutes, they're not going to. And so you're going to have those meetings available within 3 working days. Actually, open meeting law says 48 hours, but you might have a Sunday falling in there somewhere, so they do give the allowance that, you know, if you're having a meeting where a weekend is involved, that you certainly have that extra day. And 10 days to post the completed minutes. You've heard us say that several times this morning. All right, I don't think there is anything on page 35 you haven't heard except what Gretchen's going to say about the violations, because it talks about audio, video, and it talks about how important the minutes are. So I think we've really said that. I think you've heard that message. But I would like Gretchen to mention the violation on the open meeting law.
Yes, if you're found to blatantly violate the open meeting law, it's a $500 violation plus attorney's fees. So we don't want to do that. And generally, the AG's office has been very lenient with cities and towns who, you know, just innocently violate. Again, they suggest training, so you're being proactive.
Yeah, so you're going to continue with some conflicts of interest and some questions and scenarios.
Okay, so,
I'll ask a quick question.
yes.
Going back to the open meeting law, just kind of look back. Town of Queen Creek does a good job on that. I'm aware of a number of other public agencies who conduct all of their business in executive session. And then the public meeting disallows almost all knowledge of what went on.
Interesting.
And I deal lots with school boards and community college boards and university boards and school boards in particular. There's 2 or 3 even here in the valley that are just blatant and saying,
well, you know,
everything that we discuss that's going to be of any importance is on an executive session. You don't need to know that.
And they call it legal. So Ellen, you know that they're in their own mind saying, oh, this is legal, this is outside the bounds of what the public should see. But remember we talked about optics? The optics of that to the public is, hey, you guys are always conducting things in secret. We don't know what you're doing.
As a member of the public, what's your options to try to get that corrected?
Question it.
You know, it literally, you know, an email to the Attorney General's office saying, my observation is XYZ school district conducts all of its meetings in executive session. I would like to know when Arizona open meeting law will be followed, allowing the public to, you know, to see what that particular board is doing. Yeah.
Good questions today, by the way. Thank you for your participation. I'm going to quickly go over conflict of interest. And the Attorney's Office, the Arizona Revised Statute states that a conflict of interest prohibits a public officer, that would be you, from participating in any decisions. That's discussion or voting on anything that they find you have a conflict of interest. And there's 2 types, substantial and remote. And it's very difficult to define substantial because there's so many contexts, but basically it's interest that affects ownership or monetary interest, unlike remote interest, which does not create undue influence. substantial would create undue influence, okay? Does everybody get that? Okay. It also, in Arizona, conflict of interest is not just for the public officer, it also includes your relatives. And in Arizona, there's 4 basic types of relative that they refer to, and the first one is your spouse. The second is your child, and if your child has children, it would be your children. They go on to say parents, grandparents, as well as brothers, sisters, and their spouses, and their sisters and child. And it doesn't matter if it's full-blooded, half-blooded. Basically, err on the side of being conservative. You know who your family members are, both immediate and extended. Here's an example of a conflict of interest, possibly, but I want you to tell me whether this is a conflict. Let me go ahead and read it for you. A bicycle shop owner is appointed to the Transportation Advisory Committee. The committee is making recommendations to the town council on a transportation plan that includes the extent and quantity of new bike paths built throughout the town. Does the bike owner participate or declare a conflict? Why or why not? What do you think?
Conflict.
He's okay.
He's okay?
I think he's okay. You're talking about paths, not doing business,
Okay.
making
I think
money.
he's okay.
What if
Because
he-
it's town-wide, it's not
What if
specific
he's
to
the-
his location.
What if he's the only bike owner in town? What if he's the only shop in town that sells bikes? Could that be construed as, for a while, having some significant increase in sales if they make it more amenable to ride a bike in this town?
I think once you start to get into monetary benefits or derived benefits, then I think it's a problem. He's also an expert, which is most likely why he's on the committee. So I think you just have to pay attention to what the circumstances are during that discussion.
But it doesn't exclude anybody from starting a new enterprise being a bike shop either.
Sure.
So I would say that it does not, he does not, because it's a town, doesn't, unless he's specifically trying to get those paths to go through or past his store or his
Okay.
place of business,
Okay.
then he has a
Yeah,
conflict.
he wants a drive-through window put
Right.
on his bike path.
Right. And then,
Probably not gonna work.
But if you use that optic thing we were talking about earlier, that's a conflict, because if I'm a bike owner, I want more bike paths, because one way or another, I'm making more money. If people are having flat tires, if they're buying new bikes and need bike repairs, and so if we use that optical we were using earlier in our discussions, I don't think that person should be on that, in that discussion.
And there could be an either or. So we have Eric saying, no, it's not a conflict. But we also have you saying, you know what, it might be construed as giving the bike owner favor. Yes.
but on the same note, would you consider somebody that owns a car dealership not to be on a transportation committee? Because he now is selling cars and now he's perpetuating roads and, you know,
I'm not
he
talking
has.
about him not being on the committee, but when you're talking about a vote for bike paths, he shouldn't be included in
Well,
that
then that
vote.
would
So if
be-
it was a car owner, for example, and you're talking about something that's gonna deal with gas tax or something else
Or
that's gonna.
participating in new roads. If you're gonna talk about new roads, would you consider that to be a conflict too?
That's a little different then, because I'm not, with regards to a bike and a car, while they're both transportation, they're vastly different in road applications and bike paths. I mean, because you can ride your bike on the road.
You know, we could add to this that participating in the discussion is probably not a bad thing, and if there's worry about the way it appears, then you're talking about abstaining from a vote.
And so the rule of thumb, especially here in Queen Creek, is that if there's a question, don't guess. You know, because you could, the bike owner could say, you know what, I can make a decision and I can be objective, but can they really? And if it comes to that, where it's kind of either or, what do?
Abstain.
You go and talk to the town attorney. That's what they're there for. They're there to help with these discussions. So Queen Creek asks that when there is ever any kind of question, and periodically they come up, err on the side of really not guessing and going to seek legal advice through the town attorney. Good discussion. Okay, so who determines if you have a conflict?
Your town attorney.
It starts with you.
Yeah,
You
I
do.
think you do.
And again, don't guess. It's good to have these discussions and seek advice, but go to the experts that can really help and guide you in making the correct decision. What do you do if you have a conflict?
Put in the seat counsel.
And then during the meeting, you disclose your interest in the official records and you recuse yourself from discussion and from voting. And you do this in writing. Okay, and so again, you have the town clerk that can help you with the official documentation, and those are filed in the clerk's office. Okay, now, there are violations, and there have been violations in Arizona of the conflict of interest law. And basically, if it's the AG's office finds that the violation is reckless or negligent, it rises to the level of what's called a Class 1 misdemeanor. That's the highest misdemeanor that you can get in Arizona. And if there's no prior violations, generally that results in probation. If the violation is intentional, blatant, intentional, it rises to the level of a Class 6 felony, which is the lowest in the classes of felonies. If you don't have any prior violations, it generally, and I'm saying generally because it's up to the judge, the violation would be 6 months to a year imprisonment. Now, obviously, if there's a contract that's involved, it would be voided, as well as you remove yourself from office. Now, going on to entertainment and gifts. In the year 2000, the Arizona legislature passed a very broad entertainment and gift clause ban that basically had to do with expenditures that benefited public officials, okay? The definition that is used in the AG's office is the amount of any expenditure paid or incurred for admission to any sporting or cultural event or for participation in any sporting or cultural activity. Now, there's two exceptions, okay? One is any special event which everyone on the committee or board or commission are invited, okay? You all must be invited. It has to be everybody. It has to be recorded, okay? So special events can include cultural and sporting events. It includes dinners. It includes parties, anything that of that nature that all representatives are invited. The other exception is if, as a public officer, you're invited to speak at, let's say, a conference, okay? That's fine. And the only thing that would not be covered would be honorariums if you're going to be paid to speak or whatever. But speaking engagements are fine. Now, the Arizona gift clause, public entities must receive substantial benefit from any public money that they spend, okay? And gifts could include a payment or donations or a deposit, or intangible personal property is something that you can't touch. So it'd be copyrights or patents, that sort of thing. Personal and real property, and some real obvious examples would be, you know, I'll give you this job if you vote in a certain way or whatever. And the key is the third bullet point. Privileges or access that you get but are not available to the general public. Now, there's a situation that's occurring right now involving the Arizona gift clause, and that is the city of Phoenix and their 2-year union contract with the Phoenix Law Enforcement Agency. In April, the the judge presiding over this granted a preliminary injunction against a portion of that contract, which states that 6 full-time police officers can work full-time for the union. Okay, so the organization's paying them full salary to be police officers, but they're working full-time for the union. And the union, which in Arizona is considered a private entity, is also paying them, each person, $1,000 a month to do union business. So when you think about that, this is a great case study that we can all follow in the newspapers. Substantial benefit. The judge granted this injunction because the union could not substantiate or measure what the substantial benefit is for doing this, either for the organization or to the general public. Okay? Can't substantiate that. So this is a great, here's the thing that makes it a good case study for the state of Arizona. Other cities and towns in the state of Arizona have very similar contracts. So this is something that the attorneys in the cities and towns will be following very, very closely. And it's a good example of the Arizona gift clause. So if you're sure, you just start with yourself. Ask yourself, as a public officer, is what I'm doing legal and ethical? What I recommend is the Queen Creek has some wonderful standards. They continue to get better, the policies and procedures. Go back to the bylaws and review what the Queen Creek's expectations and standards are. Also, ask yourself if you're being fair and honest, and obviously, will your actions stand the test of time? And I don't think anybody wants to read about their behavior if it comes out that you're in violation in the newspaper. So we are running way, way past our time. But there are some true to life, these are violations that have occurred throughout the state of Arizona that are good discussion points. Now we can continue to go and do a couple of these, or I'm leaving it up to all of you. Do you want to keep going?
I had a question.
Okay.
When you talked about conflict of interest and you talked about public speaking or giving speakers, are you saying as a person on these committees, we're not allowed to do those speeches and receive honorariums? Or is that only when we speak on behalf of the town?
You speak on behalf. It's okay to speak publicly, to be invited to speak, yes. So should we do one?
Yeah, I have a meeting at noon, but I'll postpone it. I'll have to.
Are you sure? Because I can either
I
keep going or
personally
we
do.
can.
These gentlemen here, all I gotta do is text this person.
Make a motion.
Make a motion.
Let's do one.
Okay.
Okay, 6 members are present at a meeting of an 11-member board. 1 member declares a conflict on an action item on the agenda. Does the board act, or do they wait until the next meeting?
They wait until the next meeting. They don't have a quorum once that person.
Exactly. Very good. Let's do another one. A majority of members of a public body attend a grand opening of a new art center. During the course of the evening, all members end up seated at the same banquet table. So could this possibly be a violation?
If they talk about any issues.
Exactly.
Yes.
So over the course of years as a public servant, I've gone to quite a few public venues like this, and it's really good due diligence if we have mayor and council that have all been invited, or members of a board that have all been invited. The conservative thing to do, the transparent thing to do would be each person sitting at a different table, or no more than 2 people sitting at the same table. And again, that's public perception. Okay, let's do one more. The Center for Historical Landmarks is a nonprofit organization that wants to sell craft pieces as a fundraiser for their organization at the Queen Creek Peach Festival. The center sends the chair and several board members samples of the craft items for their review, and the organization makes it very clear that the chair and board members may keep the samples to enjoy for their own homes. What would you do? Would you accept those gifts?
Is there a value limitation on the gift?
We don't know. But that's a great question.
In some cases, there is, and if it's really minor amount, then it's okay. And
That's exactly right. The law says if it's de minimis, anything, and some cities, in fact, the city of Mesa says anything that's over $10, we don't want you to accept. So if there's a question, again, I would ask, is this, if it's a gift bag or a goodie bag, something like that they give everybody that goes through or whatever, not a big deal. But it depends on the quality of the gift, okay? And again, you'll want to, if you're not real certain, you want to ask the experts, which would be the town attorney. Okay, excellent. Okay, here's another one. An organization sends you an invitation to attend a Diamondbacks game and tailgate party, and you check the town's website. You click the council calendar and notice that the invitation has been posted, and you reasonably believe that all members of the boards and commissions are invited. What do you do?
See who the Diamondbacks are playing.
Don't you contact the town clerk to find out if all members were invited?
Yes, err on the, don't guess. And of course, you can always pay and go. you pay your own way and go. And, we have had some mayors that have been extremely conservative and they would never accept anything. And they won't even accept a free parking space. But again, never guess. What if you didn't see the invitation on the webpage?
And you get into the Fiesta Bowl ticket scandal.
Right. So you just don't want to guess.
Yeah.
You want to make sure, confirm, and the town clerk is a great place to start. Okay, a commission staff manager sends out an email addressed to all commission members providing background information regarding an issue that will require decision-making at an upcoming commission meeting. Some commissioners start an email dialogue with each other to share their thoughts and input prior to the commission meeting. Is this a violation?
Yes.
We have a yes.
Yes, I would agree.
The discussion was, I don't think that sending the information was. The sending the information, everybody probably needed to have that, but once they start discussing it, that's where the infraction comes in.
Correct. Okay, good. We're almost done. Jim Smith owns and operates Off-Roading LLC in Chandler, which plans to open an office in Queen Creek. You and Jim are acquainted through attendance at the same church. One Sunday, he approaches you and asks how to obtain a use permit in Queen Creek. You inform him of the process, you refer him to people in economic development, and eventually Jim opens his new shop in Queen Creek. One day, your family's window shopping happens to go by his shop, and you notice this $6,500 KFX 700 Kawasaki, and you like it very much. And Jim notices that you're really appreciating this, and so he explains that he'll be happy to sell it for you for $4,900. And he mentioned that he really appreciates all the help that you gave him getting his business starting in Queen Creek. Should you accept Smith's offer?
Everything was fine until Mr. Smith explains that he really appreciates all that you did for him in the Queen Creek business. Had he sold the motorcycle for only $49,000, that's a business transaction between you and the store owner. But as soon as he explains that he's doing it because you did him a favor, he's then now in violation.
It's almost like quid pro quo,
Yes.
this for that. And the question is he offering the general public this discount?
That's right.
And if he's not, then it's questionable. Excellent. Okay, the town council decides on Saturday to hold a special meeting on Monday morning at 7 a.m. to consider an annexation ordinance. Notices of the meeting are posted at Town Hall, the town library, and other town buildings, plus 2 town parks. The council meets on Wednesday and votes to annex the property. Is this a violation?
Yes.
yes,
How so?
They didn't have enough
not
business
enough,
days.
not enough notice time.
Because it's business days, so those postings have to take place, not weekend days.
Okay, here's the caveat. If the library, if all those public buildings are open on Saturday and it's posted by 7 a.m., it's okay. If they're closed, then it's a violation, okay?
Well, the town's closed on Fridays, so I know that's not, that doesn't.
Well, it has to be posted in a public place, but that public place has to be open to the public.
Right.
Okay, so a board member emails the staff manager or another board member about board business on their home computer. A member of the press comes to the member's home and asks for a copy of that email. Can the press do that, or can others do that? Can they come to your home and ask for an email that you created on your home computer?
Can't demand it.
They what?
They can't demand it. They'd have to have some court order to do it.
Is that right? Here's the deal. It doesn't matter where the email originated from. It's the communication, not the computer that you send it on. So if it's council business, they have a right to ask for it. Okay? John Doe regularly attends an all zoning board meeting and tape records for each meeting. Do you have anybody that does that? Anyway, he decides to inspect the minutes of the last public meeting just to see whether the discussion was documented appropriately. He discovers that the minutes of the meeting do not match the detail of his tape recording. In fact, some of the main points of the discussion are not even included in the minutes. Is this a violation of the open meeting law? First and foremost, I'd say that this man needs another hobby. What do you think?
It's a sloppy meeting minute taking.
It is, and actually, it's probably not. I asked the Arizona Ombudsman expert about this particular one, and she said, you know, it probably would not, we'd consider it not a violation if they had all of the 4 main components that are required by the open meeting law. So in other words, who's there, what the date, the time, the location, everybody present, everybody absent, what a general description of what was discussed, but an accurate description of everything that was voted on. And if those 4 components are there, then it's not a violation. Okay.
Question, would it be a violation if the main points were different than that of the tape?
It depends. It depends. And
Well,
again,
to his point, the main points need to be what was posted previously.
That's
Now,
correct.
if it differs from
Right.
that, then I'd say that's shoddy business.
That's where I was going with.
Right.
exactly. Very good, very good. Okay, we got one more. Thank you for your time. An agenda item provokes an interesting and spirited discussion at the XY Commission meeting. Due to the need to address other agenda items, the meeting time constraints, the discussion is tabled, and the group agrees to revisit the item at an upcoming commission or committee meeting. After the meeting, 4 commissioners meet outside the building, resume the conversation, and decide to go to the local pie shop to continue talking, brainstorming ideas, and solutions on the hot topic. Is it a violation? Is it?
If they make up a quorum.
If they make up a
Exactly.
quorum, right, it's just where I was going, how many people on the committee?
Exactly. But again, err on the side of being conservative. If you're at a local pie shop and there's almost a quorum but not, and you're well-known within the community, it could be a perception issue.
But if you're on the committee and you're not part of that group that's talking, there could be some influence that draws the quorum or changes the dynamics of the quorum too, so.
True. So use your best judgment. I want to thank all of you. Pat had to run to another facilitation up in Tempe, but thank you. I wanted to make sure that all the scenarios, we went through all of them because it's being taped, so you are not only helping current people, you're helping future people by sticking around. So thank you so much. I'm going to be sending evaluations on this program via the Survey Monkey that I used to get your initial questions, and that will be within the week. So thank you again. It's been great meeting everybody.
Thank you.